Today, we're counting down 10 brutal reasons you wouldn't last 24 hours inside a real medieval castle. Let's get into it. Number 1. The castle was trying to kill you. Let's start with the obvious. The castle itself was never built for comfort. The walls were made of thick bare stone, which absorbed cold and held onto it. There was no insulation, no glass windows, and no warmth unless you were sitting inches from a fire. Even in the Lord's chambers, you could see your breath in winter. On the lower levels, where the servants slept, it was worse. Straw beds soaked with moisture, rats chewing through the walls, and no fire at all. Add in rain leaking through thatched roofing and ice forming on the walls, and you've got a recipe for illness every single night. And you think you're tough? Try sleeping next to a drafty murder hole with nothing but a burlap blanket. Number 2, the food would rot you from the inside. You wouldn't just suffer, you'd get sick fast. Servants ate coarse bread, thin broth, or porridge made from whatever was left over. It was often stale, occasionally mouldy, and barely kept you standing. Even the nobility weren't safe. Their food was heavier, but not cleaner, salted meats, pickled vegetables, and dried grains. Everything was either overspiced to cover the taste of decay, or overcooked to kill the bacteria that still slipped through. Fresh fruit, rare, clean water, risky. Most people drank weak ale or boiled wine because it was safer than whatever was coming from the well. The result? Constant stomach issues, rotten teeth, malnutrition, and let's not even talk about parasites. Number 3. You'd be drenched in filth by midday. Castles were filthy. No matter how high your rank, you were surrounded by dirt, sweat, smoke, and worse. There was no sewage system. Human waste was dumped out of windows, into courtyards or moats. Those moats, they weren't filled with clean water. They were black, bubbling pits of rot. The kitchens, greasy, chaotic, swarming with flies. The great hall, a mix of spilled ale, gnawed bones, and straw soaked in every fluid imaginable. And baths, maybe once a season, if you were lucky. Soap was a luxury. And the concept of hygiene was, frankly, medieval. Everything smelled, everything was sticky, everything was shared. Number 4, you'd catch something before dinner. Let's talk disease. There was always someone coughing, always someone feverish, always someone missing. In the close quarters of a castle, sickness spread like wildfire. One infected cook could doom the entire household. One poorly cleaned blade could introduce infection into a wound that never healed. There were no antibiotics, no antiseptics, no understanding of germs. A splinter could become a death sentence. A cut could turn black overnight. And once illness took hold, your fate depended on rank, not medicine. A noble might get a priest and some herbs, a servant, a prayer, and a shallow grave. Number 5. You were always one mistake from brutal punishment. There was no HR department in a medieval castle. There was only the steward and the whip. If you were a servant, your entire life was built around obedience. Drop a tray, that's a beating. Talk back, that's worse. Touch something you shouldn't, you might lose a hand. Even among the nobility, things weren't much kinder. An insult could lead to a duel. A rumour could lead to exile. A jealous glance could end in poison. Castles weren't just homes, they were political arenas, and the rules were written by whoever had power that day. Number 6. The hierarchy crushed everyone. You think your boss is bad? Try living under a feudal lord. Every person in the castle had a defined role, a rank, and a duty, and defying that system was dangerous. Servants knew not to speak unless spoken to. Guards followed orders without question. Women were expected to marry for strategy, not love. Children were tools, trained for utility, not freedom. And the higher up you went, the more trapped you were. Nobles had to maintain appearances, alliances, bloodlines. You couldn't just leave. You couldn't just say no. In a castle, your life was never your own. Number 7. Fire was a constant, lethal threat. Imagine living in a place made of wood and straw, lit entirely by open flame. One knocked over candle, one grease fire in the kitchen, and the whole structure could go up in minutes. There were no alarms, no fire extinguishers, no escape plans, just yelling, panic, and maybe a bucket chain if you were fast. Many castles burned at least once in their history, some multiple times. And when they did, the loss wasn't just property, it was people. Fire didn't discriminate between noble and peasant, it took everyone. Number 8. Sleep was a privilege, not a right. There was no such thing as a good night's sleep. If you were a servant, you were woken before dawn and worked until exhaustion. If you were a noble, your nights were filled with planning, worrying, and political games, or interrupted by intruders and emergencies. Beds were straw-filled sacks, blankets were thin and infested, and even in the best rooms, the cold was unbearable, and the noise never stopped, from rats in the walls to guards outside your door. Sleep was light, broken, and never guaranteed. Number 9. Trusting anyone could get you killed. Everyone in the castle wanted something. A promotion, protection, an ally, revenge. Gossip was a weapon. Secrets were currency. A word to the wrong person could destroy your future. An accusation could brand you a thief, a traitor, or worse. People disappeared. Quietly, efficiently. One day they were beside you, and the next, gone. And no one asked why. Because if you asked too many questions, you might be next. Number 10. You couldn't escape. The castle walls were tall, but the real trap was social. You couldn't leave when you wanted. You couldn't go where you pleased. You couldn't simply quit your job or walk away from your duty. Servants were tied to their lords. Nobles were bound by blood and land. Even visiting guests were often hostages in disguise, pieces in a political game. The outside world was dangerous, yes, but for many, the castle was worse. Because once you were inside, you belonged to it. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe.